Hope everybody's having a great afternoon. In light of the fact that tomorrow, well, actually, it would be February 29th, is the 10th anniversary of the Raspberry Pi. The Raspberry Pi being a single board computer that is capable of running Linux and capable of doing multiple things in the computing industry, I thought today would be a great day to talk about some of the history. I have here in some of my collections, this is an original Raspberry Pi Model A, still in the box. Yeah, I know, shame me. This is an original, and it's so original it doesn't even have an Ethernet port on it. A lot of times you had to use the old Bluetooth adapters and stuff like this to communicate with it. You pretty much put in your operating system on an SD card, and it runs a computer operating system called Linux, which most of the newer Pis now can even run Windows 10. There's a RISC operating system for it. There are multiple operating systems, Ubuntu, Linux, multiple flavors, Debian, Raspbian, you name it, that you can run. This is the original model, the Model A, that came out 10 years ago. This was the first single board computer that came out. It was advertised at a low cost, between $25 and $35. That is one of the most debated things about a Raspberry Pi, is the fact that they advertise them as $25. However, you need an SD card. That's an extra. Well, it was more expensive back then. You need an SD card, and you need a power adapter to run it. More than usually a USB micro. You need a mouse and keyboard, and you need some kind of video out. These originals used HDMI full-size ports. And you only got one USB on this one too. And you could also use the normal composite out on these too. This was your GPIO. This is how you control other devices. And like I said, there was no Ethernet port on these original Model A's here. And as you can see also on the original Model A, it took a full-size, which I have an adapter, not an actual SD card. It took a full-size SD card here to actually run it, which to the normal Pis now, we'll get into that, take a very much smaller card. So that is basically the Model A, the first Pi that came out. And then I also have this here. This is a Raspberry Pi Model A Plus with a whopping 256 megabytes. This is the smaller version of it. It, of course, also does not have a LAN port, Ethernet port on it. It has a larger GPI, a little bit larger GPIO. Same USB, same micro, same HDMI, but if you look here, it takes the micro SD card as well. So this is a much, much older version here. And what these ended up evolving into over the years is you have things like this here. This is the Raspberry Pi, about knocked one over. This is the Raspberry Pi Model 2B. As you can see here, we now have a LAN Ethernet port. We have 4 USBs. We have still the micro SD card in the back. This one's got a case around it. I apologize. We still have the micro USB. We have HDMI port, but this one was much easier to use here. People call during the middle of videos. Isn't that great? After the 2B came out, Raspberry Pi decided it was time for the Model 3 to be introduced. This was a beefed up model. Still the same format. 4 USBs. You have the Ethernet port. These are still USB 2.0s at this time. You have the HDMI, micro USB, and SD card with much increased. You got better Wi-Fi. I think this is about the time they added Bluetooth into the mix, and you can actually start using that. Other things came about. More accessories came accessible. This is a 3B here. It had, except the exception, it has an LCD screen that you can what they call a hat that you can put on it, and it actually has the screen. It comes with a little pin. You can actually use this as a self-contained unit here as a graphical interface. As they move on now, we even have Pis that are smaller. The Raspberry Pi Zeros. This is a version 1.1, and this here is a Raspberry Pi Zero version 2W. You can even see here they have moved on to a more HDMI mini interface, USB-C power plug, still SD card. If you want the GPIO pins, more than likely you have to solder them on. This one has a case that bought with it. More than likely nowadays I just print my cases like I have with this one here. This is a 3D printed case that came with it. Some STLs that I had downloaded off of the internet, off of a free site. But those are the more smaller versions, a little bit less speed-wise, a little bit less oomph, if you will. But if your project requires a smaller footprint, then that's what you pretty much go with. And where we stand now, this is the latest version of the Pi Zero here. And what we have here, I have one that is set up. You're going to have to excuse the mess while I unpack it here. This is a Raspberry Pi 4 that is set up to do Octoprint for a 3D printer. It has the camera that takes pictures of the print as it goes. This is not assembled, it's just kind of laying in here. And as you can see, this one has a USB-C, it has the minis, it has a LAN port for the Ethernet, but as you can see, it also has the USB 3.0 jacks. As you can see, I have fans wired up this one, which one of the things has come loose there. I'll have to put that back on before I place that on the printer. But that's where we stand now with the Raspberry Pi 4. Again, they are single board computers. These actually run an operating system. You can use these as a computer with a keyboard and a mouse. A lot of people ask me, what is the difference between a Raspberry Pi and an Arduino? This is an Arduino. An Arduino is simply a microprocessor that you can give commands to run inputs and outputs to do things. Some microprocessors have the ability to run what you would consider an operating system, RTOS and things like that nature, but these are a little bit more robust. These are what you call a single board computer. And that's basically the difference, is these are single board computers. Those are microprocessors. Each has its own geared toward projects. These are in short supply now because for some reason every maker has made it easy. We've kind of driven ourselves in a corner. Everything has been developed for the Raspberry Pi. Every maker has done their project saying, you know, hey, you need a Raspberry Pi to do this, and you need a Raspberry Pi to do that. You go on a lot of sites trying to find a Raspberry Pi, you either can't find them or you're limited to one per customer. You go in Micro Center, you can't buy but one at a time. You go online to Adafruit. When they're in stock, it's limit one per customer per order. And you're kind of stuck on that. And we've pretty much painted ourselves into a corner with the chip shortage here from the COVID stuff. So, but all in all, tomorrow is the 10th anniversary of the release of the Raspberry Pi, something that has pushed innovations forward, has innovated the microprocessor industry and microprocessor controls. You can do the things from an Arduino on this. You have to do them sometimes a different way, but they still do you can do the functions on this that you can do on that. But like, again, the difference is where you can get a microprocessor microcontroller for $15 as opposed to a Raspberry Pi 4 for $45. It depends on your project. And again, the microcontrollers that you get nowadays can be this size and fit into a smaller project box and get things done. Whether it's to these, you know, when you need a single board computer solution, you go with this here. So, couple interesting facts for the 10th anniversary year, just to see where we've come from smaller boards with no internet access to larger boards with full-scale Linux access. Not as fast as a desktop or a laptop. They are, you know, limited by their size, but they have gotten a whole lot better. The Raspberry Pi 4 is a whole lot better. The Raspberry Pi 2.0 is a whole lot faster than the normal Pi Zeros that first came out. So there are several advantages in technology. I think they finally announced that they would not be coming out with a Raspberry Pi 5 this year, that they were going to concentrate more on their Pico series of microcontrollers. They do have a Pico microcontroller. I have one here. This is a Raspberry Pi Pico. This is the microcontroller version of that. This is not a single board computer. This is a microcontroller. And that they were going to concentrate more on that this year. So I was hoping that they would found a chip to replace a lot of it. It would calm some of the chip shortages, but guess no such luck for this year. So I hope this has been an interest to you. And if you have Raspberry Pis and you use them every day, I hope they serve you well and you share the same love for them as I do. Have a great day.